Good morning YouTube and welcome back to the channel. About 2 years ago, I made a video about applying breathing color varnish to fine art prints. And at the time, I was brand new to the product and I really just wanted to see if it would be a complement to my current print offering. And since then, I've learned quite a bit and I wanted to update that original video. For starters, I freaking love this product. I'd say 90 to 95% of the inkjet prints that I make are now varnished. So in this video, I want to cover a few things. First, what is varnish and what are the options from breathing color? Second, why I use this product and how it compares to over-laminated prints, which makes up the other 5 to 10% of my prints. The third is the equipment that I use and how I apply the varnish. And fourth are the lessons learned and tips for you if you're going to give this product a shot. And then of course, at the end of this video, we're going to be reviewing the results from the 2 prints that we're going to be varnishing today. I'm also going to do a scratch and moisture test from a scrap print, just so we can see how durable and moisture resistant this product is. Now, this is likely going to be a very long video, so just in case you clicked on this video for specific information and you don't want to hear me jibber jabber about everything else, I put timestamps right here. Okay, let's start with what varnish is and break down the 2 offerings from breathing color. In simplest terms, varnish is a non-porous top coating for canvas and fine art papers. This is not something that can be used on RC papers, and if you're unsure whether or not your paper can be varnished, make sure you check with the manufacturer of your specific paper. Now, I use Breathing Color's Optica 1 for most of my printing, including the ones that we're going to be working with today, and it's an excellent pairing with their varnish. The varnish sits on top of the coat and it protects it from scratches while also adding moisture and UV resistance. Now, the manufacturer calls this product archival because once prints are cured, the product will meet archival standards set forth by the Fine Art Trade Guild for pH and light fastness as enumerated in their blue wool test. Now, I'll go ahead and put the details for what a blue wool test is and what this means in the description in case you want additional details. But what's important to me, and probably you, is that varnished fine art prints are rated for at least 100 years display life. And this is quite a bit better than you can expect with any laminated print. And Breathing Color offers 2 variations of their varnish. The first, called Glamour 2, is designed to be applied by hand with a roller. It's a concentrated solution meant to be diluted with distilled water. The dilution ratio is going to depend on your application method. If you're rolling on by hand with a roller, you would dilute 30% with distilled water. If you're using an HVLP sprayer, aka high volume, low pressure, like we're going to be doing today, that dilution is 50%. Now, I want to reiterate, you want to use distilled water here. Don't risk ruining your prints with impurities in the water. Glamour 2 can be purchased in pints and gallons and has a shelf life of at least 12 months. At about $44 a pint and $162 per gallon as of the time of this filming, the gallon option is far more economical. It's offered in gloss and matte, and if you want something in between, like the semi-gloss finish that we're going to be applying today, you need to purchase gloss and matte and mix the 2 to the ratio that's going to give you the finish that you want. Now, compared to their other product, Timeless, this product has a longer wet time. It cures in about 24 hours. It's designed to be applied flat, and the longer cure time allows it to self-level. The upside here is that with some practice, you can get excellent results with no other equipment than a hand roller. The downside is that you need to keep dust and particles off the face of that flat print while it dries, and this is very difficult to do. Next, let's talk about the product that I usually use, which is Timeless, because this is specifically designed to be applied with an HVLP sprayer. This product has a much faster dry time and it cures in an hour. Additionally, as it's designed to be sprayed onto the print, it's designed to be applied vertically like the prints that we're going to be working with today. Combined with the faster dry time, this drastically reduces the risk of particles landing on the print while it's drying. Now, there is no dilution that is needed with this product. It's meant to be used directly from the jug. Unlike the Glamour 2, this comes in matte, satin, and gloss, and they also offer 3 sizes: pint, quart, and gallon. As with the Glamour 2, you get a much better price per square foot at the gallon size. You go from $30 per pint, $44 per quart, and $109 per gallon. I do want to call out that it may appear that Timeless is far less expensive. However, when you account for the fact that Glamour 2 is meant to be diluted, you end up with more than a gallon of Glamour 2, meaning the actual price per square footage of coverage is roughly the same between the 2 products. For Glamour 2, I calculated this to be about 36 cents per square foot, and that's using 450 square feet of coverage, which is the midpoint of Breathing Color's range at $163. For Timeless, the cost is about 32 cents per square foot, assuming 350 square feet of coverage at $109. I believe, however, those square footage are based on rolling the prints, and when you account for the additional dilution in HVLP spraying, the 2 should end up almost identical in price. but both are far less expensive than the square foot coverage of a comparable laminate product. Okay, so we've covered what the products are and the differences. So now let's talk about why I love this stuff so much and why I almost exclusively use it on my inkjet prints. Now, first, it's unique, and I mean this in two ways. First, this is a hand-applied product, so whether you're using a roller or HVLP sprayer, the individual applying it will impact the end result. That means no matter how hard I try to follow a consistent and methodical process, each print is going to be truly unique. And that's something that I really love about darkroom printing and is often lost with inkjet prints. If I print 10 images from my printer, I get 10 identical results. But with this process, I introduce a level of human touch into the equation, and I really like that. Second, this is not a common method for finished prints. When I see varnished prints, it's almost 100% on canvas. Very few photographers are taking the time to varnish their fine art prints, and I think that's a mistake. But for those that are willing to learn the skill and pay the tuition of maybe ruining a print or two or 3 or 4, I think you realize that this is a fantastic way to enhance your craft and stand out as an artist. Second is fine art papers. I love rag papers. They're gorgeous, the texture, the depth, they're absolutely fantastic, but you can't laminate a fine art paper. And I hate putting prints behind glass. Glass is heavy, it's expensive, and it always feels like it separates the print from the viewer. But this product allows me to not only use fine art papers, it enhances them. Because by their nature, fine art prints tend to lack the vibrance and contrast that you'll get in RC papers. This combines the best of both worlds. I get the archival properties of rag papers, the texture, the character, but then the vibrance and contrast of the RC papers. And you'll see that in the results later on. Third is glare. Because you're applying a product over a slightly textured surface, the surface does a great job scattering reflected light. The result is an almost completely glare-less viewing experience. And you'll see when we look at the finished results later on, it's an absolute game changer for me. Because even under ideal viewing conditions, which, let's be honest, very few homes or offices are gonna have, glare can completely ruin the viewing experience. This product nearly eliminates all of it. Fourth, scratch resistance. If you've ever worked with laminated or face-mounted prints, then you know they scratch very easily. And of course, those scratches are never gonna go away or be removable. And when that light catches that scratch in just the right way, it looks terrible and completely ruins the viewing experience. The scuff resistance of this stuff is incredible. Later on, I'm gonna take a key to these prints just to show you how durable they are once it's cured. And the fifth is water resistance. Do you need to clean your print? Great. Grab a lightly damp, soft rag and wipe it down. No muss, no fuss. Okay, well that's a whole lot of words about the what and why. Let's get into the materials and process for using these products.
Now, first thing is I mount all of my prints before I spray them. And this isn't actually the way Breathing Color recommends. They essentially recommend that you clip the loose print to either a board or the wall and then spray it that way. And that's totally fine. It also has the added benefit of giving that protection when you run it through the rollers to laminate it, to mount it later. But here's the thing, big prints like this are extremely hard to handle. They come on rolls, so they roll over, they crease, and they'll damage if you even look at them wrong. So to me, the risk of damaging the loose print, trying to move it back and forth, hanging it, etc., it's just too high of a risk. So my workflow is to mount the print on an oversized board, varnish it, and then trim the board to fit the frame later. This makes it easy for me to work with these massive prints without needing a second set of hands. But if you're doing smaller prints, you'll probably do just fine spraying them first and then mounting them second. Then again, if you're just gonna be doing small prints, I probably wouldn't spray at all and I would just use the roller method and use either of these two varnishes. Okay, second for materials is of course gonna be the sprayer. I'm gonna be using the Fuji Mini Mite Platinum 3. Really any HVLP sprayer should do the trick, but I've been really happy with the Fuji. Now you wanna make sure that your sprayer has a straight line tip rather than a cone pattern. The cone will be hard to control and you're gonna likely oversaturate the print and end up with drips. Now, even though I'm spraying, I always keep a clean roller on hand. I've gotten pretty good at dialing in the flow rate, but in case I do overdo it and I end up with a drip, now you're also going to want some sort of soft tip tweezers or something else that you can gently press against the print without damaging it to remove dust. You don't want to use a finger or anything that's going to mess with the finish, but I have these tweezers that have a fine finish and rubber tips, and what I'll do is I'll just gently press that rubber against the dust or fiber or whatever's on the print and then pull away, and between the moisture on that fiber and the tweezer, it'll just pull away. So I'm not actually grabbing at it, I'm just gently pressing and pulling away. Next, you're obviously gonna need clean, acid-free measuring and stirring stuff. Now these are actually just parts that I've taken from my dark room because I no longer use them up there, and now they strictly stay here in the spray room. I've marked everything with an M or a G for gloss and matte. What I do is I first pour into a clean container, and then I use these horse-sized tranquilized syringes to pull out exactly how much I need of each matte and gloss, and then I pour it into the sprayer container, mix in my distilled water, stir, and go. Additionally, I want to point out that before you measure anything out, make sure you're stirring the actual canisters. They're sitting on a shelf. You want to make sure you stir before you mix. That brings me to PPE. Now, I wear a full bunny suit, which is one of these spray suits here, gloves, goggles, and a vapor-rated respirator. Now, this is obviously going to protect me, but all of this is also going to be important to protect the print from fibers, eyelashes, and whatever else that may leave me and land on the print. So this is extremely important, not just for your own health, but to remove any headaches later on. Now, the last thing that I do want to call out that is absolutely essential is one of these dust removal systems. Now, these things are stupid expensive. I don't understand why, but they are absolutely essential. Whether you're laminating or spraying or whatever you're doing, being able to hit the print with one of these and remove all of that dust is absolutely critical. So the last step that I do before I start spraying is to roll over the print in both directions, roll it over the adhesive pad, and then hit it one more time just to make sure there's absolutely nothing on the surface of the print. So although these are absurdly expensive, they are worth it, because I used to ruin a lot of prints when I was too stubborn to buy one of these, and now I almost never have any issues with dust or fibers on the print.
Okay, let's get to varnishing. Now, of course, the first thing I have to do is close the door to my spray room, which is just this large piece of fabric. And then I dial in my spray pattern. And to do this, I take a black piece of scrap board and I keep spraying it on until I get the right pattern and the right flow rate. And the black really helps me to see exactly what I'm doing. So I just keep a few of these scraps handy so that I can get everything dialed in before I start spraying on the actual print. Now, when spraying, I keep the gun about 8 to 12 inches from the surface, and I do a continuous pattern. I go about 1 foot per second, and I want to make sure I'm overlapping the edges of the print. I let go of the trigger, move to the next row, and then start my next pass. Now, you want to do one heavy coat. And when I first started this is where I got into the most trouble, because in woodworking, I usually want to do several light coats, and I just assumed that that would be the case here. But the manufacturer recommends and makes it clear that what you want to do is one heavy coat. And this makes sense because the varnish is actually soaking into the fibers of the paper, and that's what gives it the protection. So by doing one heavy coat, I'm allowing that liquid to absorb into the papers and offer full protection. When you try to do multiple coats, what happens is that first coat hardens, and now you're applying varnish on top of that hard coat, and it has nowhere to go, and you're more inclined to get drips, which is exactly what happened to me. So of course, that's not to say that if you miss a spot or have uneven, you can't do a second pass, but it is definitely the best practice to get a heavy coat on the first pass. And that's why you'll see me go in both directions here. I go from left to right, top to bottom, and then I go right to left, bottom to top. And then once I've made those passes, what I do is I get really close to the print. And as I mentioned, I take those light tweezers and I just press against it to remove any fibers or dust that it may have landed on the print. And I try and be as gentle as I can, because even though there is some self-leveling here, when this paper's wet, if you press on it with too much pressure, you can dent the paper, and that will be visible in the final print.
Okay, now we just have to wait for them to dry. I want to point out a couple things that I forgot to mention. One is it's very important to have a place to be able to do this. I used to do this in my garage, which was terrible because there's sawdust. I would clean as much as I could and I would still have difficulty. So then I gave up on that and I decided to get a spray tent, which is a great option. You can get them on Amazon for I think anywhere from $100 to $150 depending on the size. I got the big one and it was terrible trying to set it up and tear it down indoors, but it worked. And I was able to do 6-foot prints in it with no problem. It was difficult, but I made it work. Now what I've done is I've actually built a spray room in my office, and what I did was basically build 2 walls, and in the front is a fabric panel, and I have a giant piece of PVC that runs through it so I can roll it up, hang up the PVC, walk in and out with big prints. When I'm ready to spray, I drop the fabric, use a couple of magnets to pin it up. It gives me a full enclosure, and in this way I can spray varnish, paint, whatever I need to do in there, and I don't have to worry about it getting out into the office, and it also protects from dust and everything coming in. So moving up to being able to have a spray room was critical to be able to do this, and it gives me the capacity to do prints up to 4 feet tall by 10 feet wide. which is the biggest I can do anyway. So that's been a huge upgrade, but you don't have to have that to do this process. You just need somewhere that you could spray that you don't have to worry about getting varnish on your stuff, and you can minimize dust. So definitely something I felt like I needed to call out. Additionally, I mentioned earlier that the cure time is 24 hours for Glamour 2, which is what I used today. It starts to harden actually fairly quickly. You can't press on it, like package it to ship it within until 24 hours, but it starts to harden shortly after spraying it. So I highly recommend that the workflow you follow is you spray your print and then you start checking for dust where you started your spray. Because on these big prints like this, by the time I scan the whole print looking for dust, if I get to that area where I sprayed first, it's already started to harden, and it can be difficult to remove that dust without causing damage to the print. Once you damage the finish, there's no amount of additional coats you could do to fix it. You kind of have to scrap it and move on if you can't smooth it out. So definitely start your dust search where you started spraying before it starts to harden on you. And that brings me to some of the other things that I've learned and that have been major pain points for me, and hopefully you can avoid. First is the varnish will impact the look of your print. It's going to add saturation and contrast. You need to be aware of this and do tests with small prints, as you're going to need to account for this in your post-processing. The reason I stopped using Hahnemuhl's bamboo paper is that I felt like it really brought out the warm tones in the paper and it was just too much. This is something that I tried to account for in post, but every image is so different that I found the warm tones really hard to control. And since switching to Optical 1, I'm getting much better, more neutral results. Second, you can't have much of the paper's edge unsupported. Think of a float mount print where you may want to have an eighth or a quarter of an inch or so of the paper overhanging the end of your mount so that you can't see the mount board. What's going to happen is that those edges are going to warp as they dry, and you're going to get this wavy mess on the edges. So now what I do is I back bevel my mounts, so the print is supported by the backboard and the adhesive, but the board is not visible because you have this reverse 30-degree angle. So to the viewer, it's still going to look like it's float mounted and you can't see it, but it's not going to have the issue where you have an unsupported print that's going to get wavy. And I'm going to cover this entire process in a future video. Why am I still wearing this? And if you only listen to one thing in this video, listen to this. You should expect to make mistakes, because you will, I promise you. Don't get upset, don't get discouraged, just consider it tuition. Every skill, every task requires learning and practice. This is no different. Every time I've ruined a print, I mumble curse for a few minutes, I figure out exactly what I did, why I did it, and how it happened, and then I try really hard to adjust my process so that I don't do it again. Every day is a school day. If you sign your work, make sure you test the varnish on your signature with a scrap print. If you use any kind of dye-based pen, you want to make sure that the signature is not going to bleed when the varnish hits it. I use a pencil and I found that this works well. Finally, consistency is key. Make note of every single thing you do until you really have the process down. How far do you hold the nozzle from the paper? How fast are you moving the sprayer from left to right? And how much you overlap your spray pattern. Every single part of the process. This is going to be key in identifying the cause of any issues you run into and helping you to build an easily repeatable workflow. Okay, I think I've yip-yapped enough for now. Let's go see those prints up close now they're dry.
The first image is from Dream Lake that we captured on this channel a few months ago, and this one I just wanted to show you because you see how much detail there is in the highlights and in the shadows. And the varnish does a great job of adding just a little bit of saturation to those colors, but it's this second image of the horses in Austria that I think shows the true potential. You can see each individual hair on the horse's head, but more importantly, there's a light directly overhead shining down, and it's barely a faint glow. There's virtually no glare whatsoever. But then when we look at the bottom, you can see each individual flower, the fur on the horse's legs, and the level of detail and the ability to stand this close to a print and just appreciate every bit of it is what's truly special about the varnish. Okay, so this is a reject print. As I mentioned, when I started using this product, I really had an issue with the warm tones. And you could just see how horribly orange this print is. I'm gonna put up on the screen what this print is supposed to look like. And the print out of the printer came out great. It looked just like it's supposed to. The calibration, everything was good. But I was really having issues with applying varnish and having the warm tones explode. When I switched papers, I seem to not have that issue. So I'm guessing it has something to do with the warm tones in the paper. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I couldn't get it under control with this paper. And when I moved to Optical 1, I have not had those issues. I definitely get more saturation. So when I go to print, I'll reduce that saturation. I kind of have to dial it in. but I definitely don't have the issues I used to have. This print here behind me is another reject. This is actually the first print that I varnished, and it's also very orange, so it is what it is. But they make for great test prints, which is what we're gonna do now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and try and scuff this surface just so you can see how difficult it is actually to damage it. But let me see if you can see as I'm moving it, if you don't get distracted by the burnt orange color, there's very little glare. I have can lights all around this room, as well as a video light right here. And even with all that light, there's barely any reflection, which is just incredible. If this were a laminated print or a print behind glass, you'd see reflection of everything. Not with this. And that's actually my favorite part. But another additional advantage is the scuff resistance. So let me bring you up here. Okay, so first thing is I'll just use my nails here just to show you. Even applying pressure, and you can hear I'm pressing, there's nothing there. Now, you could probably dent the board before you could scratch it with your fingernail. So if it came time to wipe this down or anything like that, using a nice soft rag, you won't have any issues. All right, so hopefully you can see this nice shadow here. This is where I'll go because I think it'll be easier for you to see. I'm gonna start with a light pass, and this is just my truck key. And just like the fingernails, nothing. So now I'm gonna put a little bit of pressure. Okay, actually, I thought that would scratch it, it didn't. I can start to see a little bit of indentation in the paper. I can actually feel it with my finger. I'm actually denting the paper, so that's causing a little bit of difference in the light bouncing off of it. So if I go at the right angle, I can see the indentation. Let me see if I can show you that. So you can see I've dented the paper by pressing down on it with the key, but there's not actually any change to the finish. It hasn't scratched it. I've just dented it with the metal. Okay, and I was just gonna wipe it with a wet rag, which I've done a lot, but I'm actually curious how well it'll do if I just pour water on it. And I've actually never done this, so we'll see. I'm gonna pour this water on. I'm gonna let it sit for about 30 seconds, and then I'll get a paper towel, soak it up, and we'll see how it looks. I'm actually using scrap fabric from our next video, which is gonna be about making linen liners. This is denim, which is not super absorptive. But just to show you, if you clean your print in the worst way imaginable, what would be the result? Huh. I have to say, I thought that was going to damage it. It didn't do anything. So outside of being a hideous color, there is no damage to that print. And that water was on there for quite a while. No scratches. Let's go find our dented spot here. Where is that? There it is. And you can see even where I keyed it, the water didn't have any penetration or issues. All right, well, that's gonna do it for me. I know this was a long one, I do apologize, but I wanted to make sure I covered as much as I possibly could. I don't think there's anything that I've done over the past couple of years that has been more impactful to my photography than varnishing prints. Prior to this, I've never been satisfied with my finished prints. When I laminate them, the glare drives me nuts. They get scuffed very easy. And then most importantly, I always worried about when they would eventually delaminate, which could happen in a day, could happen in a month, could happen in years, but it can happen. And that's always terrified me. And putting them behind glass, as I mentioned, it's heavy, it's expensive, and I just never really liked the viewing experience. I still do that for darkroom prints and things like that where you really don't have a choice, but for inkjet prints, I don't think there's any better method for presenting a finished print, and I was very excited to find this product, and I wanted to make sure I shared it with you. So hopefully I've encouraged you to try this yourself, even if it's not the breathing color products. There's other varnishes out there. I just haven't tested those personally. I'm sure they're outstanding, but if you're curious about it, I would definitely definitely encourage you to try it. And if there's anything I haven't covered in this video, if you have any questions, please reach out. I love talking about this crap. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. I've learned a lot over the past couple of years, but I'm still learning every time I do this. And that's the key, just like all things with photography, always learning, always growing, always improving. That's what it's all about. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you got something out of it. The next video either will be in the sand dune shooting or we'll be making linen liners. I'm not really sure what the order is going to be yet. I've got about 5 or 6 videos that are all filmed. I just need to edit them and get out there. So there's gonna be a lot of stuff coming up. I'm not entirely sure what's what, but hope you enjoyed this video. And otherwise, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Now get out there and make some images.